Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's the girl Alicia B, and I am back with another video for you guys today. In today's video, I'll be explaining to you guys the difference between practical nurses and registered nurses. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you guys will see that I have a video up and I explain those differences, and a lot of people actually got a lot of traction on that video. A lot of people agreed and a lot of people disagreed. Those who are LPNs agreed. Those who weren't LPNs, they somewhat agreed, but they had their little tussles in my comments. So I want to make this video to further expand what I was talking about and just to give you guys the differences between what a practical nurse is and what a registered nurse is. So if you're interested, keep on watching. So if you haven't seen that video, it starts off with saying that a lot of practical nurses get the question, are you a real nurse? And no matter what scenario or what workplace we work in, we always get that question, are you guys a real nurse? And then I've said even more that yes, we are a nurse. We could work in different clinicals, different healthcare settings, whether it be emergency, rehab, endoscopy, we could work in there. And then a lot of people are saying, oh no, practical nurses aren't really, can't really work in hospitals because they don't have that training, or registered practical nurses can't do this without having an RN supervise them. And all I said was that practical nurses are still real nurses. We may have a lower scope of practice or a lower education, and we get paid less, but we are still nurses. And they took that and they ran. Okay, they ran with it. So I want to further explain myself, because yes, we are nurses. Yes, we have a lower scope of practice. Yes, we only have 2 years of education, but we can still do what we gotta do to save your life, okay? So what I did was I made a list of things that differ from registered nurses and practical nurses, and everything down to the scope of practice, the initiation, the salary. So if you do not agree with what I said, don't argue with me. Argue with the CNO, okay? CNO is the College of Nurses of Ontario. Argue with them, don't argue with me. I'm gonna start off with the education. When you're in school for practical nursing, you are in school for 2 years and you get a diploma. When you're in school for registered nurse, you are in school for 4 years and you get a bachelor's. Now, I am located in Canada. I know the States, you guys have ADNs. I don't even know what that is, but in Canada, it's straightforward. You want to become a registered nurse? Go to school for 4 years. You want to become a licensed practical nurse or registered practical nurse? You're in school for 2 years. That's the main difference between the education years. Now, if you are LPN, you can still specialize in different areas. You can specialize in emergency, you can specialize in coronary care, you can specialize in L&D, rehab, gerontology. You can still do that as a practical nurse. As a registered nurse, you can still do that on top of more. You can specialize as a NICU, PICU, what else? You could do OR, you could do emergency, you could do way more, because again, you were in school for 4 years, so you have a more in-depth education than a licensed practical nurse. Both nurses have to take a registration test. If you are in Canada and you are going to school for LPN and you are done the school, you got registered, and then you're taking your test. The test that you have to take is called the CPNRE, the Canadian Practical Nurse Registration Exam, or the REXPN. If you are in Canada again and you were in registered nursing school, you have to take the NCLEX-RN, and that is basically your boards to make sure that you pass to become a nurse in Ontario or in Canada in general. So when you are a practical nurse, because we only have 2 years of education, our education level or depth is not as deep as practical nurses, but we are still able to care for the patients to the best of their ability to make sure they are well. So when you work in hospitals, you could work in different, again, units. You could work in emergency. I do have some friends who are LPNs who work in emergency. You can work in oncology. You can work in endoscopy, or endoscopy, whichever way you guys want to say it. You can work in rehab. You could work in cardiology as long as you have your coronary 1 and 2. And your charge nurse will assign you patients as they see fit. So if they know that you are able to care for that patient, give them the full scope of care, then you will be assigned those patients as a practical nurse. Because even though you are only what people say, they only a practical nurse, no. Even though you are a nurse, a practical nurse, you still have to use your nursing skills, judgment, and knowledge to care for that patient. So you're not gonna get a patient that you cannot care for. So that's what I mean by saying nurses, practical nurses. We are still nurses. We can still work in the hospital. We can still care for patients to the scope that they need to be cared for. If you are a RN, then also you get the more critical patients, you get the more unstable, the more unpredictable patients, because again, you have that 4 years of education and you have the more in-depth knowledge to care for those patients. That point brings us to the place of work where practical nurses could work and where registered nurses work. So I have the list here. If you are a practical nurse, you could work in hospitals, schools, clinics, and communities, and also long-term care, retirement home, assisted living. Those places are where you mostly find practical nurses. Now, if you are a registered nurses, the most likely places you're gonna find them are hospitals, emergency crisis centers, ERs, clinics, etc. Basically anywhere where nurses are needed, registered nurses are hired. Again, the differences are the places where LPNs work. They are less critical, they're more acute, they're more stable, and they're more predictable in their care. And the places where registered nurses work, depending on what they want to do, they are, again, critical, unstable, more severe, and unpredictable. Okay, so this is the tricky part. If you are in nursing school or you guys are a nurse, this is something I guess you know from the back of your hand. It's the controlled acts. Now, the controlled acts are the same for both the RNs and the LPNs. Hey, I thought they were different. So if you think they're different and you are grounded on that, don't argue with me, argue with CNO. I will put the website right here and show you guys that they say the control acts are the same for both practical nurses and registered nurses. Now, as a refresher, if you don't know them, I will list them out for you, okay? Number 1, we are performing a prescribed procedure below the dermis or mucous membrane. 2, they are administering a substance by injection or inhalation. 3, they are putting the instruments, hand or finger, beyond the air canal, beyond the point of the nasal passages where they normally narrow, beyond the larynx, beyond the opening of the urethra, beyond the labia majora, beyond the anal verge, or into an artificial opening of the body. Number 4 is dispensing a drug, and number 5 is treating by means of psychotherapy technique. So that is the controlled acts. Now, they are the same again for RPNs and RNs. But, however, you should perform them if you do have experience. If you do not have experience for both LPNs and RNs, if you don't have experience, it's always good to call another nurse and ask them for help. Ask them to show you how to do it, or ask them to monitor you while you do it to make sure that you're doing it correct. Because as a nurse, as you're performing these controlled acts, you are solely responsible for the act that you are doing. So if something was to happen to these patients while you perform these controlled acts, you are responsible. So make sure that you're using your nursing skills, judgment, and knowledge, and you're calling for help if you need help, no matter what kind of nurse you are. So now, in addition to the controlled acts, there is a part that talks about the scope of practice that I really want to point out that's super important. It says there are differences between RNs and RPNs, which is the same as LPNs, authority to initiate controlled acts. Initiation refers to independently deciding that a specific procedure within a controlled act is required and performing that procedure in the absence of an order. So that brings us to the initiation. Now, initiation is basically when you are a community nurse, most likely community nurses use initiation. That is when they are able to perform a procedure without a doctor's order, and that can only happen outside of the hospital, because once you enter the hospital's act takes precedent. You cannot do anything without a doctor's order in the hospital. But if you are in a community or healthcare home care setting, then you are able to initiate certain procedures without the need of a doctor's order. When you are initiating a control act, an RN or an LPN must assess the client and identify the problem, consider all the available options to address the problem, and weigh the risks and the benefits of each option considering the patient's or client's condition, and decide on a course of action. And once you decide on that course of action, you have to anticipate the management of potential outcomes, whether it be good or bad, and accept accountability again for deciding that the particular procedure is required and for ensuring that any potential outcome are managed appropriately. So that doesn't mean that you're able just to do every and anything. No, you have to do these steps for both LPNs and RNs to make sure that you're giving your patient the best care, even though they are outside the hospital. But once you reach the Hospital Act takes precedent, and you cannot do anything. You can't even put an IV in a person without the doctor's orders. All right, so now we're at the part where we all want to know the money, okay? Show me the money. All right. So as we all know, the RNs make way more money than the LPNs. They make at least 25 to 30 grand more a year. It is what it is. We can't do nothing about it. But if you are a LPN, there are ways that you can make way more money than the average LPN. Let's start off. If you're an LPN, the average for the US is It's $23.47. That's the average for the start. And that is in the US. But since we are in Canada, I'm going to tell you guys the Canada prices, okay? So starting off with BC, British Columbia, that is one of the highest cost of living provinces along with Ontario. So BC, the annual for LPNs are $55,000 a year, and that averages between $28 to $35 per hour. $28, $35 per hour. If you are in Alberta, you are making an annual salary of $50,156, and that averages between $27 to $28 per hour. Crazy, right? Ontario, because that is probably the highest cost of living province, your average salary is $54,600, and you are making between $26 to $27.50 per hour. You guys, it's ridiculous. I am making at least $6 to $7 more than a PSW or an HCA, and I am under legislation. I am registered. I am responsible for lives, and this is how much we're making. Now Saskatchewan is making a little bit more. They make $61 to $62, or basically $63,000 per year, which averages about $30 to $35 per hour, which is not too bad. Actually, it's not bad at all as a new grad LPN. So that's pretty good. I could say that's pretty good. That's probably that's fair. I think that's fair. Now the most is Northwest Territories, and they make between $80,000 to $83,000 a year, which averages about $40 to $46 per hour. Now I understand why it's that high, because ain't nobody will live up in Northwest Territories. Okay, it's cold, it's dark, it's lonely. We get it. But the money you're making, all that could be out the window. So if you are basically single or you don't mind relocating your family, Northwest Territories as an LPN is a place to go. Or if you want to become a travel nurse, even Northwest Territories is a good place to make money. But if you just like graduated from school and you want to basically become a staff nurse, these are the salaries that you're making in Canada as an LPN. Now as an RN, this is where the money goes up, okay? So for Northwest Territories, that was the highest for LPNs, and that obviously is the highest for RNs, and they're making, well, they're making north of $95,000 a year, okay? It's $96,642 a year. Whew. Alberta is the second highest, and that's $94,322 a year. Now y'all see why I'm going back to school? Do you guys see why I'm going back to school? You're telling me as an LPN, I am making, how much are they making? $50,000 in Alberta. But now as an RN, I'm making $94,000? is a no-brainer for me, y'all. Come on. Again, in BC, you're making $81,000. Ontario, you're making $78,000, which I think is really bad because Ontario's cost of living is very high. And as an LPN, I could be making $78,000 as a travel nurse. So tell me, how does it make any sense? Come on, Ontario. And Manitoba is the least one, and they make $41,398. So you can see where the money value definitely like shows. Becoming an RN definitely will help you in financial situations. Becoming a travel LPN will help you in financial situations. So it's basically which one you want to choose. If you want to become a travel nurse, basically the travel nurse as an RN is where the money is, okay? It's just where the money is. But that's not what we're talking about right now. We're just basically differentiating between the practical nurses and the registered nurses. So that's where the money aspect comes in. It's a pretty good bounce from being an LPN to an RN. It's definitely, it definitely pays off. It pays off. And that is it, y'all. That's all that I have for you guys when comparing a practical nurse and a registered nurse. I hope you guys definitely enjoyed this video. And if you have friends who are wondering what they want to do in school, if it's a practical route or the registered route, show them this video and let them decide for themselves, because a lot of times people choose to go to practical nursing schools, and this is something I did mention in that video on Instagram, but a lot of people do plan to go to practical nursing because, again, it's only 2 years and you still make good money as a practical nurse. Mind you, it may not be as much as an RN, but you still make enough money to support yourself and your family. So a lot of people might not want to be in school for 4 years. The tuition is high. Definitely, I think the average that I paid for my practical nursing was about $10,000 to $15,000, and for my registered program right now, that's basically what I'm paying per semester. So, like, you basically understand why people choose to be in school for only 2 years. So there's other factors more than just, oh, I want to become an RPN or I want to become an RN. It's the tuition, it's the time in school, it's the time of your personal life and your work. So it takes all the aspects in. So definitely it is a hard decision, and hopefully this video helps you as well in differentiating what the role of a practical nurse and the role of a registered nurse is. And again, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I love you guys, and I'll see you guys soon in my next one. Bye.